All right, let's move on to our next item on the agenda, principals report. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you. I would like to start by discussing ECRA, so I would ask for Steve Humphrey to come up to join us.
Chris, can I interrupt? I know there are a lot of people sitting on the floors. We have seats up front here if you want. We don't bite, so we want to sit up here. So.
Marion, could you put up, I believe, page
Thank you.
291? It's Exhibit A. It's in the agreement.
Thank you. Thank you.
So over the past few months, we've engaged in several conversations with representatives from ECRA, which is Educational Consultants and Research Associates. And in the board packet, we've included the updated agreement to reflect the language provided by our legal counsel. I wanted to highlight a few reasons why we need this service and answer some questions that were raised, and then Steve will go into more detail about the scope of sequence and deliverables. In partnering with ECRA, we'll be able to analyze data related to the district goals to inform us in making decisions about tracking individual student growth and AYP subgroups to identify students that need additional interventions. For the past 2 years, we've heard questions from you about whether or not the students are growing as much as they should be, especially related to some of our demographic groups. Students are in our ELL program, special ed program, free and reduced lunch. And right now, we do our best to estimate off of national averages, but we don't use any statistical methods or local norms to accurately assess whether or not our students are growing as much as they should be. Also, ECRA will be able to help us with program analysis, which are also questions that have been raised over the past 2 years. Is our freshman reading program as successful as we believe it is? Looking at our extended algebra program, co-teaching, all of these things, ECRA would be able to help us with. A question was raised as to whether or not all districts in Illinois use ECRA, since they're the only company in the Chicagoland area that really provides the comprehensive service and analytics that we desperately need, and that you'll hear Steve talk about. And obviously the answer is no, but it's important to note that most school districts, even one school districts, have district administrators with this responsibility, such as directors of research and assessment, even though they don't do as an extensive analysis as ECRA. Even school districts that don't have a position like that have assistant superintendents of curriculum and instruction, which have those responsibilities. They also oversee the staff evaluation process in terms of setting it up and making sure that we're in compliance with all of the new laws. And again, that's something that we don't have in this district, and so all of those responsibilities have fallen onto the building staff, which is extremely difficult to accomplish with all of the other responsibilities that we have on a daily basis towards achieving the district goals. And we also simply don't have the expertise and training that ECRA has. So instead of coming to you and asking to hire another district administrator, which would be very expensive, and we would like to partner with ECRA to provide these services, and also at a much deeper and comprehensive level than what we've been able to do in the past. Since our legal counsel confirmed that we did not need to bid this out, we didn't do a formal RFP process, but I did contact and do research on other other companies that provide this professional service. I was able to find another company based out of Edwardsville, Illinois, which is about 4 hours away, called Goshen Educational Consulting, that could provide these services, but they would have to be subcontracting some of them out. I could not get a detailed quote because we had to meet in person in order to get a more exact quote, but in emailing him the scope of services that ECRA provided us, I was quoted that it would be anywhere from $50,000 to $500,000. So another company that I looked into was Standards for Success. They're based out of Indiana, and about 90% of their clients are in Indiana. They have 4 in Illinois and a few, I believe, in Wisconsin. And we tried to set up a conference call with them this week and did not hear back. The other companies we were able to find don't provide the services that we're looking for. They provide data warehousing, which just spits information back out at you. They don't help you with the analytics or the teacher evaluation process, and there's not consulting available with those companies. So we did not get quotes from that company, those companies. Lastly, another question was about the contract and why it was switched to an indefinite one based on, and we did this based on the suggestion of ECRA, so that we weren't locked into a 3-year agreement. So that, if we felt after 2 years, we would be able to continue some of the things that ECRA has put in place for us. We would have the ability to get out of that contract. So moving forward, we would be more than happy, obviously, to provide an update right before we do budget, since this would be something that we have to budget for. And this would also be a service that the board would be well aware of. We will be using the service to report out on student growth data and how we're doing on achieving our district goals. So it's something that, at least twice a year you would hear from of how we're utilizing ECRA and how they're helping us achieve our district goals. And then lastly, there's a question about the timeline and the deliverables. And once a contract is approved and we have a consultant assigned to us, we would have a planning meeting, and then we would sit down and determine a timeline and deliverable dates. And that depends on the projects, because certain projects are easier to accomplish than others because they require less time to set them up in the front end. So that would have to be something that would take place after we have that planning meeting. So
That was a great job.
thank you.
I wish we were in those other 800 districts. Well, ECRA Group is a consulting company that works across the country, and we're a very deep analytic, research-based kind of a firm, meaning that think about us as you might a university setting where research and analytics goes on all the time. That's what we do. So what we do across the spectrum of companies or school districts and other organizations, we do write assessments, although we're not proposing that here. We do surveys, we do strategic planning, for example. We do executive searches as part of our company. We do, in this framework, consulting with districts about their assessments and analytic work that they're doing locally. And the reason that's important is you hear a lot in schools about the national averages. And so you get a range of where kids should perform nationally. This is the average nationally. Here's where your kids are at. How do you compare nationally? Here's the cut scores. You make the cut scores, you don't make the cut scores. But did the kids grow? And one of the problems always with looking at achievement is some kids won't get over the bar. They won't make the threshold of what the state has set or the federal government has set. But I got to believe, and I know this is true, that your teachers are working very hard to grow kids from where they were at the previous year. So what we do for you is take your raw data, which ACT and PSAE, the Explorer, the Plan, the Park, those are all, on the ISAT, for example, are all raw data points. And we convert that data into metrics that allow us to compare on a longitudinal basis where kids are headed. And so one of the values for us is you want to know where your kids are headed. And so when we convert those scores from those various assessments, we can predict where we think kids are going to be next year or 2 years from now or 3 years from now. That gives you a value in that you're no longer, what we used to do in schools, we used to debate the information. This information says kids are getting better. This information says we're not sure. Where are we? With our analytic and research algorithms, we're able to convert this data point into data that shows you longitudinally where you're at and project where you're going for the next year. When we work with elementary schools, we're able to predict, for example, what's happening in 5th grade and projecting that to what's going to likely happen in high school. That gives schools a time to make course corrections with kids about what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years. And so you're able to intervene at those levels to prepare kids. The high school level, same thing. If you're testing your 8th graders coming in or your freshmen and you're projecting where kids are likely to score in a couple years and you need them to be at a certain point, you have time to intervene as to whether or not that's going to happen and to show what groups you're talking about. So we do this complex analysis. We're unique in that we do that. You typically would find that kind of service with the university. I don't know that it happens there because it takes quite a few people to do that. They're very specialized. And universities are not necessarily organized like that. So we have several PhDs in our office research people that are specializing in research, people that teach statistics, even in the medical field. So very deep in terms of research and analytics and statistical programs. We're a company that has existed for over 30 years and started out as a company that did assessment work, connected to some textbook companies, and then have evolved over time as the work has changed and as schools have asked for other kinds of information. So as Kristen pointed out, we do a lot of work with schools, and one of the benefits is we consult with you. We're not trying to sell you a software program or an assessment program. We're sitting with you and saying, what are you trying to get done this year? What do you need to know this year about student performance? What information do you have already? How can we take that assessment information and convert that into usable information that'll help you go a little more focused, probably a little faster, with a greater focus on the kids you're looking at and what you want to accomplish. So that consulting work is very valuable to schools. So we don't necessarily have we have some best practices and research base we think works. Our systems that we use have been researched for over 50 years, and if you study that stuff, you can do the same thing yourself. So it's nothing specialized. It's been developed by us based on research and analytics. The scope of services, just to go over that part, most of what companies will do for schools is provide a data warehouse. We go beyond, we do that too, but we go beyond that by working with the analysis of the data for you. You also, we provide a portal so that Kristen and Kevin could go on and see today, yesterday, tonight, whenever they're in meetings, what are the scores looking like. We need to print off copies of that. We want to demonstrate that to a committee meeting. Here's the distribution of our students in different AYP groups. Here's our freshmen, here's our 8th grade, here's our math scores, and so on. So data that you have put in the system you can retrieve anytime you want to retrieve that. Those portals are developing on an ongoing basis. So every few months we put out another development of the portal, so schools are having more information that they're asking for and using. And we have user group meetings that we sponsor quarterly, so if you're working with us, you come to meetings with another 50 or 75 different districts, and we're going with those districts to develop what they need to develop. So there's an ongoing development of what's needed by school districts. That's we find to be a very usable model. The local growth model is important because it's a system or a structure that allows you to do look at your various programs, your individual students, but also get an idea of accountability-wise where you're at as a system. And that local growth model is a structure that's created based on a statistical analysis program that looks at longitudinally where kids have been and what are they likely to be doing next year. And then we look at that compared to actual growth and then look at what's been happening. That model is important to you because in that model, we take care of things like demographic differences. So if students are members of special education groups, if they're members of different subgroups within AYP, that's all factored into our analysis. A lot of times when we do what we used to do in schools with looking at data, we would say, well, here's our scores, but what does that impact have on low-income kids? What does that mean? We factor that into our formulas that's already in it. So when you get numbers, the demographic breakout is already factored in for you. And so we're talking apples to apples in terms of performance numbers. So that model is very important. We don't ask you to do more assessment. We're using the assessment you already use. In fact, we consult with clients on an ongoing basis to reduce their amount of assessments. You've heard a lot about schools saying we test too much. And so frequently we're advising clients that what do you really want to do with the assessments? What do you need to know? So what assessments are you doing? So maybe you can eliminate some assessments over time. We look at individual student achievement, and we link that achievement to many things that you might do as a district. So we're running basically a roster of all your kids, and that roster is going to print out what we call propensity scores, which are, again, combinations of all the tests the kids are taking. And we're using those numbers to then look at your teacher evaluation information you're going to need down the road when you do that. We're looking at as your principal evaluation. I understand you have a new principal this year. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to look at the numbers regarding her performance. But you can look by subgroup individually where those kids are, what members of subgroups they belong to. So ethnic subgroups, low income, special ed, ELL, and so on are part of that. By subject matter, by grade in school. So all that's broken out individually. And what that helps you do, besides linking to things like teacher and staff appraisal, It also lets you look at programs. So as Kristen referred to, when you want to look at a special intervention you created, we always feel pretty good about it because students are receiving extra help. The question is whether or not that extra help mattered any more than if kids were sitting in a classroom, in a regular room. We help you determine that and give you some information on return on investment for the dollars you spend on a program. What's the return on investment for that effort? So the program evaluation, again, particularly for boards, is found to be very beneficial because for years we've tried to determine whether or not a program is making any difference. We spend a lot on interventions. Special education analysis is usually pretty important. You have a number of students that are involved in programs. You want to know if those placements are academically sound. Same thing with RTI, who goes where in terms of special ed RTI adjustments. And we help you set benchmarks for those programs. So again, part of our consulting, that's part of the cut scores. We look at, again, we work with the teacher evaluation committee, which you'll have at some point. You'll have a joint committee that's probably been meeting. We work with that committee, help you facilitate that as part of our consulting role. Part of that is staff development, develop with the staff, what does all this mean? How can you think of assessment in an objective way so that you're protected as employees, but there's an accountability system that works for the school district as well. We meet the letter of the law regarding teacher evaluation. We are pretty proud of the fact that we're always available to you as a district. You call, and I will answer the phone or someone answer the phone, and we'll talk to Kristen or Kevin regarding the question, and there's always someone available to you on a daily basis. We think that's pretty important, so we have people there. Again, these are people that do the research, that do the analytics, that do the statistical analysis, that are always available to the school district on an ongoing basis. We assign a consultant to you that's available, will be out in the district doing the staff development, looking at the data, helping the staff look at the data, helping probe the questions that you need to be asking about the data, helping prepare reports. But a big part of that is staff development and working with the staff on what does the data mean, and helping that committee process as a joint committee for teacher evaluation. And the public dashboard is really important to districts that want to publicize where we're at in terms of data, and we work with you on that dashboard. And that's basically most of the deliverables. We do get involved with districts that want to do a research project. They want to know, can we plug attendance into our growth model? Can we plug in AP programming and scores into the analysis? Yeah, we can do that. So we do specialized reporting for you and some limited research, but we have other capabilities in terms of consulting to help you look at those questions. Largely, what we think about, besides being research and analytics, we're kind of a staff augmentation model where we're supplying you with some expertise that you wouldn't have unless you hired someone. And if you hired someone, you probably wouldn't have the technical sophistication to do what we do, or the technology to do what we do, just because of what we've been doing for so many years and because of the depth of what we've developed. So we think the staff augmentation helps districts not have to hire people. And yet, we can go a lot of different directions with the information we have to provide, and different directions based on what we're continually discovering. We recently today, for example, most of you are aware that Explorer is going away. So districts are asking, how do we replace that? We have an assessment that we've developed to replace that assessment, because schools want to know, how do we look at 8th graders coming in, and what does that look like as we work toward PARC and Common Core? The deliverables I have in the documents you have, and that's pretty, I think, obvious when you look at the scope. You're going to have AYP subgroup analysis, individual student projections, program evaluations that you would tell me what you want to evaluate. We deliver a report on that. The benchmark analysis, individual student growth analysis, facilitation of the joint committee, the dashboard, and again, staff development is scheduled. Those are all specific deliverables, which there's more than that here, but those are some of the highlights. So I'm happy to try to answer questions you may have beyond what Kristen's alluded to, but we're excited to work with you. And again, I think given where districts are looking at accountability and looking at our kids growing, I think people work really hard in school districts. Boards work hard, administrators work hard, the teachers work really hard, and the students work really hard, and the parents to get kids to perform. And sometimes we just can't tell our story because we don't have the right information. And what I feel good about is our information to you lets you talk about growth and where kids are at. Because we know that kids are growing every year. But that's a hard thing to define unless you have the ability to change that data into that kind of information.
Any questions for Steve?
Who are some of your other high school district clients?
Well,
Northern
yeah, there's
Illinois.
several. Niles is pretty close to you guys. District 88 is a little bit west of here. Hinsdale is down the road a little ways. Those are the ones that just, Rich Township in the south suburbs, for example. Revis High School, not too far from
I
here.
have a question for you, Steve.
Sure.
How customizable is the benchmark going against? I mean, if we wanted to carve out and say we want to benchmark, we've got the top 10% high
Right.
school districts as opposed to the national average.
Right.
Is it flexible to
Sure.
use benchmark?
We're working that with you. So we're working with your staff on what are you trying to set for benchmarks and why. That makes sense. If you do that, where does that take you? So we try to
Right,
help you
and then you
define
customize the program based off of that 10%
that.
compare.
Right. Everything is customized for your district where you want to set marks. And we talk to you about what the best practices are, what typically happens across the state, what are the benefits, the pros and cons of doing it a certain way. So,
And your database for the benchmark,
right.
is it only your population of
No,
clients
it's
you have,
statewide.
or do you have the statewide in there?
Statewide,
So
right.
you have the statewide.
Right.
Any other questions for Steve?
I think Mr. Walsh had a question in regards to the terms of the contract. It's something that we can discuss.
We don't need to ask.
Oh, we want to talk about that when I'm talking to Ms. Matan.
Whatever you want to do.
So I understand that what you're proposing is that there's not a limit on there so that we have flexibility in the event we want to change the terms of the agreement. I think the board's concern, or Mr. Walsh's question, was because of the policy with outside contracts and vendors, is that the board doesn't want to get into a practice of just continuing to renew contracts. They want to make sure that every so many years that we review a contract and make sure that we're getting the best deal, or if there's other services with other vendors, so that we're not just continuing to renew. So that's something we may need to revisit in regards to putting a term limit on there, or at least some type of term limit that will cause us to come back to the board and discuss where we're at with the services and with the fees.
We've worked with all of our clients, and even though we have had some clients that prefer the 3-year arrangement, and we prefer that length of time because it takes a while to get this all up and going, and it takes us time to do the formulas and all that, and so that sometimes works for some people. It doesn't matter to us really if it's year to year or if it's a 3-year window. We've never had anyone who said, money has shifted for us, we need to make a change. We've always done that. We're working with you because we believe in public education, we believe in what you're doing. If you want to make a change and it's a 3-year agreement and you say after a year and a half, we need to make a change, then we're going to work with you on that. We're not going to deny because we have a contract. That's just not going to drive us.
Well, I will ask you a question, take some pressure off, Rick. Since we're a superintendent, you know the rules.
Right.
And you advised us on other basis. I think this is a good idea. I think we need to do it. But I have a fundamental problem with not bidding work out.
Sure. Right.
My brother is in Washington right now on the National School Board Superintendent's meeting. If I called him tomorrow and said, here's what we want, are there other vendors available? Is it likely he would come tell me that you're the only person who can provide us this service?
We're not aware of people. I know of districts who have tried to put an RFP out for this. It's very difficult to find people that will even respond. And as Kristen pointed out, the ones that do are very pricey because it's a costly process unless you do it all the time and you're able to work with us and you're so familiar with it, you can drive the cost down of operations. The last time I heard of a RFP was not too far from here in a high school district, and the competitors were well over $175,000. So I feel comfortable that for what we're doing for you and the ongoing relationship, and it's a handshake. If it weren't for the legal requirements, we'd say, let's just work with you. That's how we take the approach. We're going to sit with you and work with you on what you want to get done. But I'm not aware of people that go as deep as we do because you almost have to have a university setting to do this because of the level of education required to run the analysis that we do. So that's why our people are teaching at Northwestern and at UIC and Loyola, very high-end places because they're very talented. But the idea of an RFP works, but certainly you're within the legal parameters. And I would say this to you, although as a superintendent in my previous life, we would try to do an RFP or a bill on everything. There's just times that it doesn't work. I mean, and certainly this is one of those things. and I know the quality of what we do, so you certainly have my assurance for what that's worth, that you'd have a high-level operation. And I know some of you too well, 'cause I've been here before with you, and so you know where I'm at. And I would never recommend something that I couldn't stand behind, or that I couldn't defend the idea of what you get for your dollars, because we're with districts a lot. And we're out with we had a consultant today that I talked to, was out in the district all day today. It was the middle of summer and beyond the scope of work. And she just went out anyway, because that's kind of how we do things. So,
So
but you don't
Kristen-
have to bid it, and your legal would tell you that. And certainly, I think it's judicious to always bid it when you can, but I think if you do that, you will go down the road of other districts, and you'll find warehouse, as Kristen pointed out, you'll find warehouse companies that just give you data back. It'll look nice, and we'll cut scores. This many kids are above this line, this many kids are above this line, this many kids are above that line. They'll do some averaging. Potentially, it may not even be credible averaging, but that's what you get mostly. But the ones that actually do the analysis are pretty expensive.
So Kristen, let me ask you a question, because one of the things that we want, that when we came back in and got reelected for this next term, was that we would take and assess kids every year and tell them where we think they're gonna be. And then at that end of that year, we do a testing and say, did we hit it or did we not? And if we didn't hit it, what are we gonna do to make it up, or what do we need to do to change the game plan going forward? This helps to make that process happen?
Without a doubt, right now we're using a national average which is EPAS growth, which we talked about earlier in the year, which is 5 points, but that doesn't take into consideration any of the demographics, and that's just based on the national average. So this would provide us a lot more information and provide the students and the parents of how on track they are to be successful in the ACT.
And you'll use this to make policy plans, changes to curriculum that needed to be made?
Yes, we would plan on using this to drive most of our decisions related to different programs that we use, as well as individual interventions that we're providing to students.
Okay, anybody else? Steve, thank you. You've
Thank you,
always
Ken.
been a good person for RB, and we appreciate this presentation, and we'll be voting on this at.
Thanks. Look forward to it. Good luck.
Be in touch.
much.
Thank you, Steve.
Good night.
Okay. Please, his head's gonna get big now. So.
Kristen,
All right.
can you just briefly summarize what the board, the end of the year report and the principal report, and I think you refer to that later, and we can touch back on that maybe in August?
Yes. I also have a few other things under the principal's report. We have our upcoming annual residency event that we've been preparing for, that all students enrolled for next year are required to go through with their parents. So if you're in the audience or watching and you haven't made an appointment, visit our new website and go to the residency quick link. The dates are July 21st and 22nd from 12 to 8, July 29th, August 4th and 5th from 8 to 4. It's also important that the students go, because that's their opportunity to not only take their yearbook picture, but also get their ID and their schedules, and we can't do that without the students there. I want to also provide you a brief update on summer school. We'll have a more formal report in the fall that will be comprehensive, but we're currently in our second session of summer school, which we added this year, which is just credit recovery. We have 22 students currently completing courses through our online program called Apex, and most of the students are either fifth-year seniors, will be fifth-year seniors in the fall, or will be seniors and significantly short credits. And then we do have a few students who attended first session of summer school but needed a full year of credit, and so they've continued on during the second session. Our first session was also very successful. We had about 130 students earn credit in either health, government, bio, algebra, geometry, or English, and then 19 in the credit recovery program, and then we had almost 70 students in driver's ed. Academic workshops we added this year. We were able to run our CAP class, which is our college admissions prep class, and our Bridge to RB for freshmen. The other academic workshops that we offered that were new this year did not run due to enrollment, so we already have some plans to make sure we communicate that in a more detailed manner to parents and students next year to get the enrollment so that we can run those. And then we've had some academic camps as well. RBTV offers a course every year for our incoming freshmen, and they had 25 students participate. So I believe their numbers have gone up. And Camp College, which we offer to seniors to help them prepare for college applications, and that entire process, including financial aid, has gone up, I believe almost doubled. We had 43 students this year, so we had to add another session to that. So that's very exciting, and then we had a variety of band opportunities for students. Lastly, the year in review, which Kevin mentioned, was added to the board packet today, and this is just a very comprehensive report of all of the academic, extracurricular, service, and athletic accomplishments of both our staff and students. And soon it will be posted on our website, as well as referred to in the district newsletter for all of the community to see. And I can go over more detail about that in August if you'd like.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks. Any questions for Kristen?
Sorry. Whose idea was that?
Whose idea
The
was?
year-end summary, I don't recall seeing that before,
I believe it's something that we do
We've done it
every year.
annually since I arrived.
but it hasn't been on the website, or?
I believe it was on the website. Locating it might not have been as easy, but
It's good.
Any other questions for Kristen?